Diversity.
Do you believe that rape laws are laden with racial baggage?
Robert, do you have any questions you want me to ask your dad? You sure? Did you ever see Senator Casey try to sneak a beer past Jesus in high school?
I never saw that, Senator.
Oh, okay. Wise answer. And NAPABA is funded by Mr. George Soros, is it not?
Senator, I'm not familiar with the funding. I was a member and I paid the dues, but I had no contact with any of the members there. I joined the organization because I thought it would give me a community of other Asian American attorneys and judges.
You think our criminal justice system is institutionally racist, do you?
Senator, I don't believe that our court system by its nature is racist.
Why did you say this then? You and Senator Casey went to high school together?
Yes, we did, Senator.
Did you ever see Senator Casey try to sneak a beer past Jesus in high school?
I never saw that, Senator.
Oh, okay. Wise answer. Judge Vacca, you are a member of an organization called the National Association Pacific American Bar Association, are you not?
I was, Senator. My membership lapsed at the beginning of this year, but I was a member for 2 years.
Well, my record shows you were a member for 22 years.
Senator, that was a mistake, and I actually sent a letter after I saw that mistake to the committee, so it was 2 years.
Okay. And I'll call it the NAP-ABA, is that the correct acronym?
I think NAPABA.
NAPABA?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And NAPABA is funded by Mr. George Soros, is it not?
Senator, I'm not familiar with the funding. I was a member and I paid the dues, but I had no contact with any of the members there, and so that's why I let my membership lapse.
Well, its website says that it's funded by the Open Society Foundations, which are founded by Mr. George Soros. Now, NAPABA in March of 2023, while you were still a member, NAPABA issued a statement, and it said that it supports allowing transgender and intersex girls and women to participate in all sports. Is that correct?
Senator, I'm not familiar with NAPABA's statement, so I'll take your word for it.
You didn't know anything about that?
No, Senator, I joined the organization because I thought it would give me a community of other Asian American attorneys and judges, but I didn't have any interaction with anyone in the group. I didn't attend any meetings or vote, and so I'm not aware of that statement or any of other statements made by NAPABA.
So this is all an epiphany to you. Is that right?
Yes, Senator.
Okay. NAPABA also issued a statement that said the following. It supports state and local governmental entities that choose not to honor ICE detainer requests and that do also decline to detain individuals solely on the basis of an ICE detainer request. So NAPABA opposes supporting ICE. Is that correct?
From what you just read, Senator, I guess I haven't read that statement, but I can tell you, Senator, that I don't ascribe to any of those statements that you just read to me.
Okay. Judge, in October of 2020, you ran for judge, is that right?
Yes.
Okay. And on a talk radio interview. Here's what you said. I'm going to quote.
Okay.
It's okay. We also need to recognize the effects of racism on our criminal justice system. Institutional racism impacts all of society. I think that is amplified in our criminal justice system. We see that in the disproportionate number of black men and women being incarcerated and convicted, end quote. Did I read that correctly?
Senator, I haven't listened to that particular show, but I'll take your word for it.
Yeah, okay. What do you think our criminal justice system is institutionally racist, do you?
Senator, I don't believe that our court system, by its nature, is racist.
Why did you say this then?
Well, what I meant by that was that I believe there are racial disparities in our communities.
Yeah, but that's not, we both know there's racism in every society, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not what you said. You said the criminal justice system is not just racist, it's institutionally racist. And then you said that, I'm going to quote your words, not mine, the disproportionate number of black men and women incarcerated and convicted are because of race. Did you say that?
Senator, what I was talking about was the racial disparities in.
And you said it solely has to do with the color of a person's skin. You really believe that, Judge?
Well, no, Senator, I don't believe that at all.
Why did you say it? You said it, you were running for judge, you said it in front of God and country on a live.
What I said, Senator, was that I recognize that racial disparities in our community can influence rates of incarceration.
That's not what you said. You're a political activist, aren't you, Judge?
No, not at all, Senator.
Yeah. Okay, I'm over. Thanks, Mr. Chairman, for your indulgence.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and congratulations, Judge Kidd. You're going to be able to tell pretty easily that we are the two senators representing California because we both enjoy emphasizing the value of diversity in this committee and in our questions of nominees that come before us. So appreciate listening to the conversation I walked in on about the diverse perspectives that are important to have on the bench. Firm believer and cheerleader for diversity on the bench, not just because I think it improves the work product of the federal judiciary, when there are people with a wide variety of both life and professional experiences that feed into the deliberations and the decisions. But in addition to that, I think as we're working to restore public confidence in the federal judiciary, we'll leave the Supreme Court alone here for a minute, but at all levels. And so coming into this process with that mindfulness, not just of what you and your potential service would represent, but I heard your mention about expanding the opportunities and access for clerkships, because you know how important clerkships can be for young attorneys as they're beginning their careers, whether it's in public service or in the private sector and beyond. So I heard a couple of the ideas that you mentioned. I don't know if there's any others of what you would do if you're fortunate enough to be confirmed to continue to broaden that reach and diversity for clerks in your courtroom.
Yes, Senator. So in addition to what I spoke about earlier, I do believe that there are things that we can do to improve the pipeline. The pipeline, I think, is part of the problem, the issue that can be addressed. So I have participated in several pipeline programs that are developed to address the pipeline. Such the Administrative Office of the Federal Courts had one a year or two ago about magistrate judges, and it was really to inform lawyers, law students about the process of becoming a magistrate judge, to kind of pull the curtain back a little bit on that process and to encourage people who might not otherwise think of themselves as someone who could be a magistrate judge to give that a second thought and provide resources for them and an opportunity to speak to current magistrate judges. So in that way, addressing school groups the same way, law schools especially, I think is another way to address that problem of just putting in in law students' minds the idea that that is something that they want to do, so that then we then have a better pool of applicants to draw from.
Look, I'm a big believer in those pipeline programs, as you call them, or outreach programs, as I understood them. I am not an attorney. I'm an engineer, and if it wasn't for those outreach programs when I was in high school, I don't think I would have thought of it or certainly achieved it. So there's a lot of value there.
Do you believe that rape laws are laden with racial baggage?
Senator, I have never made that statement, and as a former prosecutor, I prosecuted individuals who had committed crimes against children and other sexually violent crimes.
Okay. Reason I raised the question is that you're cited in the acknowledgments, very early in the acknowledgments, in a law review article written by Monica Bell, in which she thanks you for conversations that shaped the article. In this article, she makes a number of claims, including the suggestion repeatedly that rape laws, child rape laws, including rape laws generally as well, are laden with racial baggage. She also makes the case that the image of the child molester or the rapist is often disproportionately or unfairly leveled, this sort of racial dog whistle, and makes a lot of these cases after thanking you for conversations that shaped it. Are you saying you disagree with her characterization of the law in that respect?
Senator, I think I recall the article that you're talking about, and I believe that Monica Bell, who's my law school classmate, wrote that article while we were in law school, and I certainly have not made any statements, and I don't recall making any statements to now Professor Bell regarding any rape laws, so I do not adopt anything that she has stated. I'm certain we had conversations generally in law school. I don't recall what they were about, but I certainly do not recall any conversations about rape laws.
Do you share those views that she expressed?
Senator, as best as I can recall your summary, I do not share the views. I would certainly follow whatever laws are in place with regard to rape and whatever issue happens to be at issue.
All right, in the same article, she also stated, quote, when a law threatens to impinge on constitutional rights, and especially where those at risk are those whom society would most like to cast out or even exterminate, courts must understand and evaluate the social forces that motivated these laws. Today, child molestation sparks the same urge for community isolation and the spirit of vigilantism that rape did in the Coker era. An analysis of the multi-layered political context of capital child rape laws suggests that the social forces surrounding the new legislation are inescapably too intense, too frenzied, too emotional, and too mired in racial and class-based prejudice to avoid arbitrariness and caprice. Now, I'm not quite sure what she means by laws that implicate constitutional rights. In a sense, all criminal laws do that, and that they will restrain your liberty if you violate them and you're found guilty. She's arguing, in essence, that evaluating criminal statutes that implicate constitutional rights in one way or another, that in doing that, courts have to understand and evaluate these social forces that animate whatever it is that prompted the enactment of the legislation to begin with. Do you agree with that statement? And what bearing should that have? When and under what circumstances is it appropriate for a federal judge to consider what forces animated the enactment of a statute, for example, prohibiting rape?
Senator, I do not agree with that statement. As a sitting judge, and if I'm confirmed to the 11th Circuit, I would follow the law, and I would follow Supreme Court precedent, the 11th Circuit precedent, It's not my job as a judge to assess societal forces. That's left to the policymakers, not to me.
Are there any circumstances under which the social forces that motivated the enactment of a statute under consideration by the court should be taken into account? If so, what would those circumstances be?
Senator, I know that there are certain circumstances, for instance, with religious liberty, where if there is a law in terms of assessing whether it's actually generally applicable and neutral, the courts can look to certain circumstances surrounding its enactment. But as a general matter, no senator would not look outside of the plain text of the law.
So outside the narrow context of the city of Hialeah versus Church of the Lukumi Babaluai, you would say you typically would not do that as a federal judge?
That's correct.
I just want to talk a little bit about the law. Tell me about the war powers clauses in Articles 1 and 2.
Well, Senator, my understanding of the war powers is that the executive maintains significant authority with regard to the war, but that it has to be authorized by Congress.
What do you mean authorized?
Senator, I don't have a more that issue has not come before me, sure. But I don't have a more specific definition of authorization than that the Congress has to. It's up to the Congress to to authorize it. I can't say more than that, Senator.
Okay. All right. Let's talk about another issue you'll see if you're confirmed with the 11th Circuit. It's an issue we struggle with every day, and as do the federal courts. Tell me about the non-delegation doctrine.
My understanding, Senator, of the non-delegation doctrine is that Congress should not delegate its powers to other branches of government except in certain limited circumstances.
And what are those limited circumstances?
I believe, based on my understanding, that Congress can, for instance, delegate some of its authority to the executive, such as executive agencies, if that authority is carefully circumscribed.
What? I'm not following you. The Constitution's pretty clear in Article 1 that the legislative power resides in the United States Congress, and we can't give it away. But your argument is that we can.
Senator, it's my understanding that in certain limited circumstances that are carefully circumscribed, that Congress can delegate some of its authority to.
Okay. What's the guiding principle, though? If we tomorrow, if Congress passed a law and said we're no longer going to confirm judges, we're going to set up a special agency within the executive branch and give that agency the authority to confirm judges. Somebody's going to litigate it. What would be the principle that the court would follow?
Senator, I would certainly, if that issue were to come before me on the 11th Circuit, if I'm fortunate to be confirmed, I would research the Supreme Court's precedent and guidance on that issue and any binding 11th Circuit precedent on the issue, if there is any, and address that issue. But in terms of the hypothetical situation, Senator, I would leave it at that.
Okay. Well, let me ask you this. Let's set aside what the principle is for a moment. The Supreme Court has been pretty clear what the principle is. It goes back, 80 years. But let's suppose Well, strike that. What I'm trying to understand is how you think, Judge. What do you think the principle ought to be? I mean, our founders were very clear that the legislative power is ours, and clearly we've given away that legislative power in some instances to some administrative agencies. What do you think the principle ought to be? Could the Congress just come in one week and said, we're tired, let's just give it all to the president for about 6 months while we go fishing? Would that be constitutional?
Well, certainly, Senator, I think to that extent would unlikely be constitutional based on...
Why do you think?
Based on the principle that I just stated, that and that you have reiterated, that...
Which is?
That Congress cannot delegate its authority except in certain circumstances.
And those are?
And those are ones that, Senator, I would not want to speculate about. I can say that I would follow the Supreme Court's guidance on that, and my understanding of that guidance is that those circumstances are very narrow.
Okay. But you're not familiar with the principle?
Senator, to the extent that you're looking for a specific articulation,
yes.
I would have to look at the case law and follow up on that.
Robert, do you have any questions you want me to ask your dad? You sure? Now's your shot, man. Do you have anything you'd like to say to us, Robert? It's okay. A wise man once said nothing.
I think he had a hello for you.
A wise man once said nothing. Thank you, Judge.
Judge Kidd, I want to ask you about U.S. versus Rodriguez-Sanchez. You remember that case?
Senator, the name does not ring a bell, but perhaps
Okay.
the facts might.
All right, this was an illegal immigrant from Mexico, and you ordered him released from federal custody pending trial. And he had quite a criminal history. He had a series of charges, including resisting an officer with violence, 2 charges of domestic violence. He was deported by ICE in 2011, and then at some point, he illegally re-entered the country. Now, in deciding to release this illegal alien, you essentially determined that under the Bail Reform Act, he did not pose a danger to the community. Do you think that crimes of domestic violence are serious enough to impose a danger to the community?
To answer that question, Senator, yes, and I don't recall that specific case, but if this were an illegal reentry case, I would note that it's pretty rare that release is granted in those cases, so I imagine I also would have placed him on house arrest or
Well,
with GPS
he was
monitoring.
on an ICE detainer when you decided to release him. And another consideration for deciding whether to release a criminal defendant pending trial is if they pose a flight risk. And how could you possibly argue that an illegal alien with a criminal record and they were going to be deported by ICE, that they were not a flight risk?
Senator, in those cases, the question is whether there are any conditions that I could impose that would mitigate any risk of flight. And again, I don't recall that specific one, but generally, if it's...
Would you like to review that and then submit an answer to me in your questions? Because to me, when we're looking at crime that is committed by illegal entrants into this country, this is something that is of tremendous concern to me. Another one that is of concern to me is the article, and Senator Lee mentioned the article to you that deals with child rape laws. And I've done a lot of work working on children that are being trafficked. And the chairman's done a lot of work dealing with child sexual abuse and exploitative material. But the fact that you were listed as having had conversations that shaped an article about capital child rape laws is of concern to me. One of your statements, and I'm going to quote you on this, is that capital child rape statutes are formed at the nexus of three movements: the popular movement to shame, fear, and isolate sex offenders, the feminist movement for harsher punishment of sexual and intrafamilial violence, and the legal and political movement to punish attacks against vulnerable victims with death. So there's a lot in that. So do you think there is currently a popular movement to shame, fear, and isolate sex offenders?
Senator, that was not my statement.
That was not your statement. It's an article you contributed to, and that is the author stating, and I'm quoting that. That was it. So do you agree with that? Do you think that there is a popular movement to shame, to fear, to isolate sex offenders? Do you think sex offenders are criminals? Or do you see them as victims? Do you think that there is a feminist movement that is pushing for harsher penalties and punishments of sexual and intrafamilial violence?
Senator, as a former prosecutor, I prosecuted many cases involving sex offenses, and I believe that those offenses and those people who commit them should be punished.
Let me ask you this. Do you think it's wrong for the article to advocate for harsher punishments for sexual and intrafamilial incest violence?
Do I think that it's wrong to advocate for harsher
Right.
punishment? Senator, as to the particular policy considerations, I would leave to this body. But again, as a former prosecutor, I did seek significant punishments for those who engaged in those offenses.
Okay, why don't you pull your records and let us know how many conversations you had with the author that shaped the contents of the article. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.